Six Flags Over Georgia is a 290-acre theme park located in Austell, Georgia. Originally opening in 1967, it was the second ever Six Flags park, with the first being Six Flags Over Texas, opening in 1961. The opening of this theme park made Six Flags to be the first ever theme park chain in America, which at the time was a revolutionary concept. It's now the standard for most theme parks these days. I recently visited this park, to be exact on April Fool's Day, which is pretty ironic. But in today's video, I'm going to go over my review of the park and why I think it is very, very, very underrated. To begin, let's start with the entry experience. When you enter the park, the first thing you do is drive under Goliath. This is a really cool view. You don't see this at a lot of theme parks, going under one of their star attractions. This personally for me and for a lot of others gets you really excited for your day. Then, if you're like me, you have to go to the bigger overflow lot. They have a smaller lot closer to the entrance, but it's often closed, such as the day I went. It may seem bad going to an overflow lot, but it's actually really cool as you get to go around the side of the park and you get good views of Mindbender, Georgia Scorcher, Batman, and several other rides and attractions. Once you go through security, you'll end up at the entrance, and when you walk in, you get greeted with this Main Street style entrance area. It's really nice and it's full of some shops such as Coaster Candy. Once you walk past Main Street, you can go one of two ways, left or right. I started by going to the left. On the left, you have rides such as Georgia Scorcher, and what my first ride of the day was Daredevil Dive. If you go right, that will bring you straight over to Twisted Cyclone, and if you go down a little bit more, it will take you to Acrophobia, which was sadly closed on my visit. And before you worry, no, closed rides is not a theme. That was the only closed ride in the park that day, at least of note. Anyways, with that being said, I'm going to go over what I did in my day in order. When I got there, it was about an hour after park opening, but it had rained the whole hour before, so all the rides were still closed. So me and my group, we headed straight over to Daredevil Dive. We were some of the first people in line, so we were able to get on it in about 15 minutes, because by the time we had got to it, it was still testing. This is a really solid Gerstlauer Eurofighter. It's a weird one, but it's really fun. I'm not going to go too in-depth because I do plan on making a separate review for this ride. After Daredevil Dive, I headed over to the Arkham area and started by doing the Riddler Mindbender. This ride was formerly called just the Mindbender, but it was refurbished for the 2021 season as the Riddler Mindbender, featuring new trains. A lot of people said this ride is not as good after the refurbishment, as the new B&M trains do not run as fast on the course as they did with the old Schwarzkopf trains. This was irrelevant to me though because I had never ridden it before, and I still greatly enjoyed the ride. It was very forceful and fun. I rode in the very back row and there wasn't really that much airtime, but I didn't mind. I liked the positive G's and the fun view. After the Riddler Mindbender, I headed over to Batman the Ride. This is their B&M invert and is a bat clone. These are pretty common across the Six Flags chain. The one here at Six Flags Over Georgia was actually my first ever bat clone I did, and boy was it a great one. It's widely considered one of the best ones, and I see why. It was very smooth and intense, and I loved it. This is another ride that will be in its own separate review in the future, so make sure you look out for that. After this ride, I headed on up to the only flat ride I did that day, Pandemonium. Pandemonium is the park's Zamperla giant discovery, and I loved it. I had never done a traditional pendulum before, only ones that had inverted, or those claw-styled fair rides. It gave good floater airtime on the max swings, which I greatly enjoyed. Sadly though, this has horrific capacity and took forever to load. I would highly recommend starting with this ride if you want to do it when you enter the park, or saving it for late in the day when most of the crowds have left. I made the mistake of doing this midday and had to wait 45 minutes in the hot, barely shaded queue line. Overall, it was a solid ride though, so I didn't mind. After this, I headed over to a Dippin' Dot stand nearby and got a soft pretzel, and it was really, really good. This is definitely what I would recommend if you want a snack at Six Flags. It was very doughy and soft and hot, and it came with a nice cheese dipping sauce too. After this, I headed over to Blue Hawk. This is the park's Vekoma looping coaster. And no, it's not an SLC or a modern looper. It's one of the rare sit-down loopers that's custom designed. It originally opened as Ninja with a red color scheme and the old over-the-shoulder restraints, but in 2016 it was refurbished to Blue Hawk with a new paint scheme, apparent retracking, and what I think was the best part, new trains with vest restraints. This eliminated all of the headbanging on the ride, which I appreciated because it did have a bit of a rattle, and the main culprit in my opinion was there were some jerky transitions. But overall, it was a really fun and intense looper, and I think it's quite underrated. After Blue Hawk, I headed over to what is a very polarizing coaster, the Great American Scream Machine. And boy, do I have some words for this coaster. Even with the recent track work, it's still the second roughest coaster I've ever done. It featured very jerky transitions, and overall a very bumpy ride. But I didn't hate it, I just didn't think it was that good. And normally, I don't mind roughness too bad. I can ride Mind Blower and I still enjoy it, because it has a good layout. But the issue is, this ride does not have a good layout. It features no forces, except for maybe a little laterals, but that's not enough to make a good ride in my opinion. After Great American Scream Machine, I did Justice League Battle for Metropolis. And I gotta say it right here, this is one of my favorite shooting dark rides I've ever done. It was well themed, had lots of targets to aim at, and overall, it was a great experience, and I'm glad I was able to do it. After this, I hit the next coaster of the day, Superman Ultimate Flight. This B&M flyer is pretty fun, but honestly, it felt really short. There's only a few elements on this ride: the drop, the pretzel loop, 2 overbank turns, a helix, and an inline twist. But all of the elements were really fun, and I overall enjoyed this ride quite a bit. Then, I hit something that's not standard for a Six Flags park. A dark ride. And no, it's not a Justice League, but Monster Mansion. Oh my god, Monster Mansion. This was the weirdest, most fun, most fever dreamish ride I've ever done. It felt like if a Disney designer went to Six Flags, did some kind of weird drug, and made a ride based off of what he felt while he was on it. This whole thing was like an acid trip, and I loved every second of it. It was so fun. I normally don't make reviews on dark rides, but I might have to make a review on this dark ride, just to show how insane it was, for those of you who don't know. Honestly, I don't think I'm going to, because I think it's better just to experience the weird, wacky ride like I did, with no spoilers. Just go into it completely blind, and you'll see what I mean after you ride it. Because I will not lie, going into Monster Mansion blind was my favorite decision I made the whole trip. After this, I headed over to the Dahlonega Mine Train. This was my first time doing a mine train coaster, and I think I loved it more than 90% of people would. I thought it was an amazing ride. It was so janky, and you know, I love janky rides. This thing was a hot mess, and I loved it. The only moment I did not like was that final drop, because suddenly, when you're in the pitch black darkness, there's just randomly like an S-bend, and that was pretty painful. But the rest of the ride was really fun, really weird, and I loved it. So, I would definitely recommend this ride, just be warned it's pretty janky. So far, if you couldn't tell, I had a great day. There was no lines for any of the rides. Everything went well, until I tried to do Goliath. This ride has a single rider line, so I decided, hey, we'll take advantage of it. We don't mind if we're split up. It's a 45-minute queue line. Let's go skip it. So we wait in the single rider line for 20 minutes. We get up to the front, and the guy sees me and my group talking and says, hey, you guys aren't single riders. You can't use it. And we mentioned, hey, we're fine being split up so we can help capacity and fill in empty seats. Why can't we do it? He's like, well, because you guys aren't alone. You're not single riders. You're a group. You can't ride this in this line. And I was like, that's so stupid. So we wasted 20 minutes in line for nothing. So then we just went in the regular line, waited 45 minutes, but luckily we were able to get the back row and even ran into another group of friends. So we rode with them, and it was awesome. This was my second favorite coaster here, and it was really awesome, but the operations were horrible. They were only running one train on their star attraction on a busy Saturday, which already is a red flag, and they were getting very slow dispatches. But luckily, there's another ride that had even slower dispatches I'll mention later. But anyways, overall, it was an amazing ride, and honestly might be Mako for my favorite B&M Hyper. But that's not really determined yet. I'll go back to that after I ride Pipeline. Something I forgot to mention, this was also my 50th credit, which is very special to me. After this, I had, well, in quotes, dinner at Johnny Rockets. It was not very good. I literally just ate onion rings. They were okay, but they were so greasy I almost wanted to throw up after eating 5 of them. After this interesting dinner, we rode the ride I was most excited for, Twisted Cyclone. This is a mini RMC that was converted from the old Georgia Cyclone wooden coaster, which was a Coney Island cyclone recreation. Overall, this was my favorite ride at the park, but there was a glaring issue. Just like Goliath, their other star attraction, they were running one train, but this ride had even worse dispatches. I counted, they were only dispatching one train about every 8 to 10 minutes. Yes, 8 to 10 minutes. I had to wait in an hour line for this. By the end of this, I was getting pretty worried because the park was about to close soon, and I had to meet up with my group since I was on a field trip so that we could leave right when the park closed. So I was worried I was not going to have time to get all the credits in the rides I wanted to do, since I still wanted to do the log flume and I needed to do Georgia Scorcher still for the credit. Anyways, though, the ride was amazing and was definitely my favorite ride at Six Flags Over Georgia. It had insanely powerful airtime, amazing godly inversions, and an amazing pacing. I loved every second of the ride. Honestly, I think it's just about perfect. I don't think I could change anything about it. When we got off, we saw we had 30 minutes left before the park closed, and Georgia Scorcher was a 20-minute line. So we decided to risk it and get on it. And oh boy, did I mean risk it. Overall, Georgia Scorcher was a solid ride, but I was not a very big fan of the stand-up position. I followed the method Canobie Coaster discussed, but I still found the ride pretty uncomfortable. It had a very fun layout though, so at least I was able to enjoy that. But back on the discussion of risking it, I gotta mention something. Whenever we got off that ride, it was 8:59. The park closed at 9. Oh my god, when we got off that ride, we had to sprint for our lives to get to the meeting point with our group, and somehow we made it just in time. And with that being said, that was my day at Six Flags Over Georgia. I really enjoyed the park, and I hope whenever you guys eventually visit, or if you have visited, you have or will enjoy it just like I did. Overall, I would like to give this park a 10 out of 10, but I think just with some of the operation issues and stuff, I'll have to give it a 9 out of 10. Overall, this is an amazing park, and with some work, it can definitely become a 10 out of 10. If you guys enjoyed this review, please make sure to comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.